Hey there, it's Carly with the Expat Focus podcast. Is your dream to live or continue living in France? It is possible as a non-EU citizen without needing to get married or become a student to make it happen. American Alison Lunes lives in France. She runs the website Paris Unraveled, and she helps people to navigate French administration, like visa applications, in a way that's much less stressful than going it alone. Alison's going to talk through the main options for non-Europeans, from getting paxed to moving off a student visa, being sponsored by a company, or going it alone as self-employed. And she's going to explain what you need to put into your application to make your French dream a reality. I wanted to ask you, first off, you say on your website, the second time you moved to Paris, you were essentially addicted to the struggle of French bureaucracy. I know when I have to do anything to do with French administration, I want to run the other way. What made it so addictive for you?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. So, I think I was just wrapped up in the idea that it had to be hard. And whenever you talk to people, even now, like when I talk to people in my Facebook group or when I talk to my clients, if you ask multiple people like how to do some task in French bureaucracy, you're going to get a different answer from each person. You're not going to have any clarity. And then once you go to do the thing, it's not going to be anything like what the people said. I think I've always been somebody who was like a researcher who wanted to get as much information as I could before I went to do the thing. If I had to go to the bank, for example, I would like make up my little list of vocabulary. So I made sure I knew all the words that I needed and all the phrases that I needed before I would go. And when you're used to doing that type of research and knowing in advance, like I did that because I was very anxious and I was afraid of like doing the wrong thing and getting in trouble or like missing something that was really important. And so, when I did all that research, the only effect it had was that it confused me more. Um, and then it makes things seem really hard. And then you get like a little bit of a rush when you finally like get it and figure it out. You're like, yay, I did this thing.
Wonderful dopamine injection of achievement.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, whenever you check off things on your to-do list, it's like, I feel so good that I was able that I was able to do all this stuff when, there was all that when there was all this struggle behind it. Like it feels like a much bigger win than it actually was.
So, specifically today, we're going to be talking about visas and the different types that exist for France and the common issues that people come up against when it comes to getting the right visa, applying for the right visa, and navigating that. I know I'm personally quite lucky as a European passport holder. I was able to come to France quite easily. How was that for yourself as an American?
So both of the times that I moved to France, I came to study abroad for a year, and so I was on a student visa then. And after I graduated college, university, and came back, I was also on a student visa. And I stayed on a student visa for a couple of years. Like I just kept accumulating master's degrees because I wanted to stay in France. And so it also happened to be very lucky that I met my husband while I was teaching English. And so by the time I was sort of running out on being a student and not wanting to continue my studies anymore, I was able to just get married and switch over my visa that way. And at the time, yeah, I was very unclear on how I would have stayed otherwise because I was working in a job that wasn't related to my field of studies or to anything that I wanted to do. I had done my degrees in comparative literature and French literature and like fairy tales, literally. And then my job was like working in taxes. And meanwhile, I was starting my website, Paris Unraveled, and I was writing and doing all this stuff, but I really didn't have a clear path for how I would have stayed in France if I hadn't happened to get married. So it was a lucky, I didn't get married to be able to stay in France. Like that wasn't the motivation, but it certainly made things a lot easier for me.
Is it a pathway that a lot of expats seem to think they have to take to be able to stay in France, is to do a quickie marriage?
Sometimes I do get kind of a lot of questions about that. What happens even more often is that people get paxed. And I always really worry when people are inquiring about Pax because Pax is a civil partnership that does not guarantee the same rights as marriage. and you don't actually have a right to a working visa and a private family life visa if you're partnershiped through a PAX. And so, if people are considering it, like they think PAX is like, well, it's not like getting married, it's less serious, and therefore, I'm going to have the same rights to be in France as if I were married, but it's not like it's not the commitment of marriage. But the problem is that it doesn't give you the same rights. You have to be living together in PACS for at least 1 year before you're even considered eligible to apply for the private life visa. If you haven't been together and living together for a year, then you only get, or you can only get, a visitor visa or maybe a student visa or something. So I see a lot of people who do that and who end up in a precarious situation because they were expecting to be able to work, and they were really just doing it to be able to stay, and then it doesn't work out how they expect. And then, of course, once you get PAXed and try to go for the visa through PAX, if you then back up and try to get married instead, that throws up a whole lot of red flags in the French administration, who realize that, you're just trying to do it for the visa. And that can cause you to undergo a lot of scrutiny. So I don't think there's a ton of people getting married specifically for the visa, but if people are in a relationship and that's where it's headed, I usually advise them, well, the best thing to do is to get married, even if it's a little bit before you're ready, because that makes your path a whole lot easier to navigate.
You're going to have a whole lot more options than getting paxed.
Exactly, because PAX is considered an élément d'appréciation in your dossier for a resident card. So if you've been here for a couple of years and you've been a student and you have a job and you're otherwise well integrated, and you've lived together for 6 months, and then you get paxed, and then you live together for a year after you get paxed, and you have this whole relationship and pictures of traveling together and whatever, then you're going to be a really good candidate for the vie privée visa. But if you have been here as an au pair if you've been in France as an au pair for a year, and you don't want to continue your language studies, but you want to stay in France and get a full-time job, and you decide that the best way to do that is to get paxed with your friend, they're going to see that you have an expiring visa, that you haven't been in France very long, that you haven't had a job that's going to continue, and they're going to tell you, well, you can enroll in classes and stay on a student visa, or you can get a visitor visa. And then people realize, like, oh, well, if I'm on a visitor visa, I can't work. My partner can't support me because we're young, and then it can cause a lot of issues.
So do people in that situation, you're a student, you're in a relationship, you're not at the marriage stage, it's early days, or maybe you're single, can students transition into a visa that allows them to live and work in France with full kind of rights, or are they in a bit of a tricky situation?
It kind of depends. The thing about the vie privée visa that you get when you're married, or if you've been paxed for more than a year, the advantage of that is that it gives you full working rights to any profession in France, provided that you are legally qualified to do it. So you can set up your own business and be self-employed and work as a micro-entrepreneur. You can get a salary job in a CDD or a CDI, and your ability to stay and work in France isn't tied specifically to your employment. So, for example, if you fall into a really bad job that isn't working out for you, you can leave your job without consequence. If you get fired and go on unemployment, then you can collect unemployment and it's not going to put your visa in jeopardy. Now, if you're a student, it really depends on what your field of study has been, how long you've been in France, how much you've studied, and what kind of work you want to do. Obviously there are certain fields that are much better than others in terms of finding employment and getting sponsored. So if you're a student, the way you're going to do things is, if you're a language student, then it's really hard to transition from being a language student to getting any kind of full-time employment, because the company has to treat you as though they're sponsoring a foreign worker. And that means in most cases they have to prove that they tried to hire somebody who already has working papers in France, so a French citizen, an EU citizen, or somebody who is already here as a long-term resident. And they have to pay a tax to OFI of 55% of 1 month's salary. So in most cases, that first hurdle is going to be pretty much insurmountable, especially if you're young, especially if you don't have a lot of qualifications, if you have less than a master's degree.
The
That's going to
competition is
be
just too high.
the
There's too many
competition
other
is
cheaper
high.
options.
Exactly. And if you don't have the special qualifications, even if the company, wants to hire you, they're going to send your file off to Direct. Direct is Direction Territoriale du Travail, du Commerce, de la Consommation et de l'Emploi. I think I got that right.
I'll
Um,
believe you.
it's a really long, I, you know, all of those French acronyms are, can kind of run together in your head. But the Direct is basically a French organization that validates any work contracts for foreigners in France and any businesses that foreigners want to create in France. So if you get hired by a French company, they have to send off the job posting, your resume, your diplomas and everything to Direct. They also have to submit copies of the applications from the people who were not hired. So basically,
Wow.
Direct has
So
to
much proof.
say, yeah, and so Direct has to say, okay, yeah, we believe you that this person is the best person for the job, even though there's EU competition. Clearly you have a degree that is superior and have, these additional technical skills. So you have to be like head and shoulders above the rest in terms of your qualifications, because otherwise Direct is going to come back and say, well, this other candidate who already is an EU citizen and who is on unemployment looks good for the position as well, so you have to hire him instead. So that's what happens if a company wants to hire a foreign worker, or if they want to hire you from a student visa if you don't have a degree. Now, if the salary is above 36,000 euros, then they do not have to prove they tried to hire a French or EU person, because then you become eligible for something called the passeport talent salarié. And the passeport talent salarié has employment that is non opposable, which means that Direct cannot object to them hiring you for that high of a salary. Now, in France, though, you have to realize 97% of French salaried employees earn less than 37,000 euros a year. So 36,000 euros, even though it may not seem like it's a really high salary to an American, that's a really high salary in France. And so you have to realize that that's not going to be the entry level salary that you're getting out of college or even out of a master's degree.
Definitely the exception to the rule.
Yeah, that's going to be a management level position after at least 5 to 10 years of professional experience. So what are your other options? If you are a student who has done at least 2 years of higher education in a French university, gotten a degree, so most of the time this is going to be a master's degree, although it can be an undergraduate degree if you had those 2 years of education completed in France, then you are eligible for something called an APS, which is an Autorisation Provisoire de Séjour. Now, the APS is 1 year where basically you're on a student visa, but you don't have to be completing studies. It's 1 year where you're allowed to continue working if you have a part-time job as a student. You're babysitting, you're working at Starbucks or a bar or whatever. You're allowed to continue working on your student job up to 20 hours per week while you are looking for full-time employment. Once you find a full-time CDD or CDI contract, then you can switch to salarié status, and the company does not have to prove that they tried to hire the French or EU person. So they only have to pay the tax to OFI, which is 55% of 1 month's salary, which a lot of companies, unfortunately, are still not willing to do. So the situation is slightly better if you have a degree. The only caveat I would say for that particular situation is that if you have done your studies in a field where there's high unemployment, Direct could still theoretically oppose you being hired. So if you do something really a bit nebulous like communications, or, mine in comparative literature, like focusing on folk tales, I was never, that doesn't lead to very many,
Direct employable options.
direct employable positions. Now I could probably finagle it into marketing or, something to do with storytelling. There are ways to frame your your skills and your expertise. But if you're in something purely academic, yeah, or a field with high unemployment, then you're going to have trouble getting sponsored, especially because the job that you find has to be directly related to the degree that you just completed. So it's not like, I did my degree in comparative literature, and then the first job that I had after I graduated and was waiting to get married was working in a tax office. And that has nothing to do, that has nothing to do with what I had done in school. And so he wouldn't have been able to hire me off of APS based on that degree.
Alison, it sort of makes me realize why suddenly getting paxed or getting married sounds so much more attractive, particularly to students.
Yeah. Or to anybody, really.
So, what if you are not a student? You're a professional who's trying to be able to move to France to continue your career. You don't have the benefit of an EU passport or a family that means you could just move to France. Is being sponsored by a company as a professional realistic in France?
It can be if you're really highly qualified in your field and have a lot of professional experience. But it's something that takes a lot of time, and it's going to cause you a lot of frustration. Like I said, you're looking at jobs that mostly are going to have salaries over 36,000 euros. They're jobs that people are going to recruit you for. If it's management or higher, usually it's a possibility. But honestly, it's really hard, and not many of my clients end up going that route. A lot of times I help people who are in their 30s or early 40s who want to do some kind of career change and who go the route of learning French as a student, enrolling in a master's degree program, and then leveraging some internships during their master's degree to that position that they get hired
to find a way to get a job.
Out of APS. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing about that route is that it takes several years, obviously, to put that into place. And during that time, as a student, you're not allowed to work full time. And so if you're, a real adult and want to work full time and earn real adult money so that you're not living in 10 square meters, then it can be a hard shift to shift down to being a student and everything. What I advise people to do a lot, and what I usually help my clients with, is to apply for something called the Profession Libérale visa. Now, the Profession Libérale visa is not something that is heavily advertised by the French government because they promote the Passeport Talent Entrepreneur visa. The Passeport Talent Entrepreneur visa is for investors who want to start a company and who have either a master's degree or 5 years of professional experience and who want to invest at least 30,000 euros in starting a company. So normally that's for companies that would have, either hire employees or would have some kind of need for space, materials, whatever that would, require those expenses to be invested up front. It doesn't have to be a material investment in equipment or physical space rentals or anything like that, but it does have to be starting a company with at least a 30,000 euro capital. My business
not achievable for everybody, for example.
Not achievable for everybody unless you have savings, a lot of savings. And the other issue is you can only, when you're on this particular visa, you can only support yourself with revenue from your company. You can't work for anybody else while you're
fingers crossed you're actually successful.
Yeah. So that's a big investment for a lot of people, and it has a lot of requirements. Running a company is also much more administratively complex, especially if you're not familiar with the French system. So for a lot of people, that's, that seems overly complicated for them. Especially, if you have a business like mine where I literally just need my computer, it wouldn't make sense to make a 30,000 euro investment in that. So where does that leave people? So a lot of people hear about that particular visa and think, well, I can't start a company, I can't start a business in France because I don't need to make that investment, and maybe they don't have a master's degree or whatever, and they don't have 30,000 euros. So what they don't realize is that there are two other types of visas. One is called commerçant and one is called profession libérale, and those are also for people who want to be self-employed. Now, commerçant is going to be for anybody doing a commercial activity like buying and selling things, or for somebody who's starting an actual limited liability company. And so there is some kind of investment in that. There is, engaging with the French system and setting up the French business structure. And usually even that is too much of a financial burden and an administrative burden for somebody who has a very simple business. So the Profession Libérale visa allows people to set up as freelancers using a business structure called micro-entrepreneur, or used to be called auto-entrepreneur. And what that allows you to do is to be self-employed, to have clients anywhere in the world, and to declare your income, pay social taxes and income taxes in France, and to start your path towards becoming a permanent French resident and a citizen. There's no minimum requirement for education, for investment. You do have to have enough money in the bank to support yourself. You do have to have a strong business idea with potential clients. But normally, if I have clients who have a minimum of professional experience, and even some people who want to work remotely for jobs in the US, or teaching English to kids in China, or doing freelance writing, or anything that can be done via the internet, there's almost no cost upfront in starting the business. They have the skills and the education required to do those things. The internet makes it really easy and basically free to find people who can be your potential clients. And so I find that to be a really great solution, because no company has to sponsor you. You just have to put together the business plan and put together a realistic idea of what you're going to be able to do.
I guess you would also need the funds to show you can support yourself while you're getting your business off the ground, if it's a physical business in France and not just bringing your clients to continue servicing them over the internet, for example.
Yeah, it does get a little bit tricky if there are actual business expenses, like if you're starting a store, or some kind of shop, some kind of
Holiday home, or
physically making products. You still, obviously, in your business plan, you have to show that you have the money to invest, that you're able to pay your expenses, and that you're able to pay your own living expenses while you're building up your business. But for somebody who has a really simple business, like a virtual assistant, or teaching English, or even photographer, anything like that, you show you already have the equipment that you need, and the amount that you have to have in the bank is going to be at a maximum 1,500 euros per month for 1 year. So that works out to about 18,000 euros. But usually it's far less than that, because you're going to show that you already have income coming into your business. So if you have 8,000 euros in the bank, but you're going to provide letters with your business plan saying, I have John Smith from Kansas City who's going to pay me $800 per month for my virtual assistant business, and I have this French company who's going to pay me 400 euros per month for social media services. That's already almost 1,200 euros per month that you're going to have coming in when you arrive. So by setting up those clients, and this is something I help my clients to do when I help them to start their self-employment activity, we nail down a couple of clients right from the beginning, so that it shows the government that, okay, you're going to have this money coming in. So even though you only have 8,000 euros in the bank, you're not going to be using that up right away as soon as you move.
Alison, how long does it take to actually be green lighted for your visa in France? Because I know sometimes you can be waiting for quite a long time when it comes to making applications for various things.
That's a good question, and the answer as with everything is it depends. So if you're applying in France, you're only allowed to do change of status for certain visa types in France. So this would be if you're changing status from a student to an APS, or an APS to salarié, or student or APS to profession libérale. There are a couple of things to consider. One, you have to make the appointment in advance. Two, when you go to the appointment, if it's just a simple renewal, then you're just going to get renewed automatically on that day. The clients that I have who are switching to profession libérale in France normally get approved the same day that they have their appointment. Normally the way it works, at least in Paris, is we go to the appointment, they review the business plan, it gets approved, and they say, okay, go set up your business, register, bring back all these forms to us in 2 to 3 months, and then they officially issue the card. So they give you time to get set up before they officially confirm it. If you're starting a company or going for a passport talent visa, those are evaluated by committee or committees who are external to the prefecture, and so those can take 3 to 6 months. I had one client who was waiting on a positive response. They approved her, and then they requested more information, and she was waiting for close to 9 months before she actually got her card. Meanwhile, she was able to work, but she was in a little bit of limbo while she was waiting. If you are applying from outside of France, at a consulate in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, in most cases for a profession libérale visa, you're going to have it in less than 10 days. I do have one client.
Wow, that's super quick.
Yeah. It does take some time. For a profession libérale, it does take some time to put together. I usually want to start working with my clients 8 to 12 weeks before their visa appointment. And then I advise them to make their visa appointment no later than 1 month before the day they want to leave. So if they want to leave on April 1st, I suggest they have their visa appointment no later than March 1st, which means we start working together basically now between November and January to get that visa application ready for March. I have heard some stories about visas taking longer than that, but normally when that happens, it's because the business plan sounded too complicated. So I have one client who put together this really beautiful business plan for her web design business. It sounds really great. She has all these potential clients, and she put the name of her business as a studio. So she had her business name Studio. So when they hear that, they think, oh, this person is starting like a real design studio, and she's going to be starting a company and having employees, and it's going to be this big thing. So then they really scrutinize your financials, and they see, like, are you going to be able to do it? And a lot of times if you make it sound really good and then your financials are kind of wimpy because it's really just you, they get a little bit confused. So it is really important when you're putting together the business plan and the financial projections to make sure everything is congruent with the idea that it's just going to be you and your computer or whatever, doing your whatever service it is that you provide. You don't want to confuse them with too much information or too many big ideas.
And be aware of those language nuances that could confuse.
Exactly.
And if you're a sole trader, you're a freelancer, you kind of work month to month based on your clients, do you need to be earning a large amount of money to be able to move to France and run your little business in France? Or is a modest income going to be acceptable?
So when I work with my clients, a lot of them are just starting out as business owners. A lot of them have not been freelancers before, and they're doing this as a way to leave their jobs and move to France. So it's absolutely not required to have already had a business before you move, and that's something that I coach my clients through. I say that my service is part doing the visa application, but it's also at least half business coaching, in helping them figure out, okay, this is how you start a business, this is how you decide what services you offer, what prices to charge, how to make sure you're not undercharging, how to make sure you have enough clients, all of that stuff that goes along with the things that you need to figure out in the first couple of years of business that I didn't really figure out until my 4th year in business. What the prefecture is looking for ultimately is about 1,500 euros per month, which is not a whole lot. That's gross. That's your total gross income before expenses.
Before taxes and...
Yeah. I don't recommend putting a lot of detail into the expenses because as a micro entrepreneur and auto entrepreneur, you're not allowed to deduct expenses. And so I kind of tend to ignore them as much as possible in the business plan. So 1,500 euros per month gross is not a ton. That's basically minimum wage in France. And for most people, that's going to be 2 to 3 clients. I do like to have my clients have potential clients or have future clients before they arrive here. And that being said, they do understand to a certain extent that it takes time to build up a business. So the way it works is the profession libérale visa is for 1 year. You arrive in France, you set up your business, something that I help my clients do. Set up your business, register, start paying taxes, start hopefully earning income, start making connections. And you do get a little bit of time to build it up. 1 year after you arrive, you go to renew your visa. And at that point, the prefecture is going to review all of your invoices, your billing, your tax declarations, and see how much money you've had and how much money you've earned and how much your business has grown through the first year.
Have you
So
been working or have you just been drinking wine and eating cheese?
basically. Yeah, so if your business is growing steadily and you're getting close to that 1,500 euros per month by the end of the first year, then that's totally fine. I was there with one client. The agents were discussing whether or not to renew somebody who had only earned 10,000 euros the previous year. They gave her an additional year to try to get. Now, obviously, she was going to have to, focus on growing her business in the following year because 10,000 euros is less than, it's about 900 euros a month gross. So they did want her to improve that. But the good thing is that if you earn more than 1,500 euros, or if your income is very steady, then you're going to be able to get anywhere from 1 to 4 years at the renewal. So what I tell my clients is I want them in their business plan to map out how they can earn up to 2,500 to 3,000 euros per month by the end of the first year, with the idea that that's going to get them 4 years.
Yeah, keeping that end goal in mind of being able to have a longer term life in France.
Yeah. And so even if you only get 1 year, I mean, you can keep renewing. 98% of visas are renewed automatically, without an issue. It's very likely that you'll be able to renew even if you earn slightly less than a 1,500, especially during your first year. But obviously, getting that 4 years or even getting 2 years takes the pressure off of you, because then you don't have to worry about that administration and renewing
Reporting
the
in
visa
every
next year.
year.
So it
That
takes,
would be such a stress.
yeah, and that's the great thing about these multi-year visas that they've now put into place, is that it used to be you would make an appointment, you would go to your appointment 3 months after your visa had expired, you would get a récépissé for 3 months, pick up the card 3 months later, and then your card would only be valid for 6 months. So in another 3 months, you had to make the appointment to go back to go back to renew your visa again. So you were constantly getting. Sometimes people would get their cards issued, and the card was already expired. So that doesn't happen anymore, which is great. But yeah, I mean, it takes the pressure off. So the idea, what they really want you to do is they want you to have 1 year where you're really successful. You're growing your business. You're getting up to 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 per month by the end of the first year. You get that 4-year card. And so then by the time your 4-year card is expiring, you're going to get a 10-year card and become a permanent resident. And then you're also eligible to apply for naturalization, because at that point you will have been paying your taxes for 5 years. And if you've been steadily self-employed, that's going to be a really solid application for being naturalized as a French citizen. So they're really trying to streamline the process in that way. And by staying on the same visa type and obviously paying taxes and earning income, that gives you a much clearer path and much more straightforward path to residency than the example we had earlier, which was doing language studies and then being a student and then getting the APS and then hopefully finding a job and then spending a couple years tied to one particular employer because you're on the salarié visa and you can't switch and you can't get fired and you can't resign. So
Gives you a lot more freedom.
yeah.
With regard to these visas where you're coming to France and setting up your own business, it's a daunting thing for anyone. It's not the ideal situation for everyone, and not everyone is going to be successful. Is there a safety net for you when you're on these visas and you're not earning enough money? For example, this woman that you mentioned that had only earned 10,000 euros. Will the government, or should you expect the government to help you out if you can't pay your rent every month and your business is not going so well in France?
So the tricky thing about the profession libérale visa or any of the self-employment visas is that you're expected to work full-time on your business so that it becomes a success. Now, you're right in that can put a lot of pressure on you as a new entrepreneur. I like to tell people, I left my job. It was a really horrible job that was very toxic for me. I left it to start my business, and I tell people I left a year too early for my financial security, and a year too late for my mental health. So that beginning, that beginning bout of entrepreneurship can be really hard. And what I try to do with my clients is ideally I'm working with them throughout the year and providing that business coaching and those strategy sessions to help them find clients so that they don't feel lost and they don't get stuck. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of help available. And the person who was earning 10,000 euros, she wasn't my client. So I just overheard them talking about whether or not they should renew her. So I don't know what her personal situation was. Now, a couple of things you should know is that one, it's pretty easy to find basic freelance work online, even if it's, from clients in your home country, in the United States, wherever. There's always that as a safety net, including things like teaching English online. There are companies that offer that kind of contract. And what you can do is you can add secondary activities to your freelance business. So if, for example, your primary activity is as a web designer or a photographer or a consultant, and you find that, a couple of months you're just not making money, you can add that secondary activity of teaching English and start working for one of these companies, and it will, provide that support. Another thing to know, I have one client who is a tour guide, and so her busiest times of year obviously are the summer from, March or April through October-ish. And so once January rolls around, she's not going to have a lot to do. But that doesn't mean that having a couple of low months in January and February is going to completely throw her business off for the whole year. Having a seasonal business is not going to be a problem in terms of renewal. But on the other hand, it is up to you to have the savings in place to be able to pay your bills during those months.
Are you entitled to unemployment payments when you're on this visa?
No. The only exception, if you have had other employment in France, like let's say you're a student and you were working on a CDD and your CDD comes to an end and you're switching from your CDD to being a profession libérale, then you might be entitled to unemployment from your CDD contract ending, and there are special provisions that allow for reduced taxes in the first year of starting your business if you're registered with Pôle emploi. So if you've already been employed in France, you've been in France for a couple of years and you've already been working, then it's possible that you would have some assistance during the first year, maybe two. I benefited from that when I left my previous job. I benefited from unemployment for about a year and a half while I was starting my business, and that really helped me to be able to focus on growing my business. But if you're just arriving in France and this is your first visa and you've never worked in France before, then you're not going to be entitled to anything.
So the main thing, I guess, is to make sure that you have enough savings when you come over and are prepared to do that work to make your French business a success.
Yeah, well, that's going to be a big part of it, is making sure you do have those savings. But even bigger than that is going to be, having a really clear idea of what you're doing. So, that's what I help people with, is imagining the vision for what their business is going to look like, for what services they're going to provide, getting really clear on their purpose, because those are things that people flounder with in the first couple of years of their business. And honestly, being unclear about what exactly it is that you're doing, and being stressed about whether or not you're going to find clients, those are the two things that will sink any entrepreneur really fast. And so, by investing a little bit of time and money up front into having somebody help you, figure out all of those aspects of your business, you're going to go a long way to making sure that you're really just focusing on getting the clients to you that are your ideal clients, and on, providing the services that are going to help them. The most important thing is going to be creating your vision and making sure that everything in your business plan supports that vision that you have in your mind of what you're going to do.
That's it for this episode. If you want to share your own experience of applying for a French visa or want to ask Alison any questions, head over to expatfocus.com and follow the links to our France forum or Facebook group. Be sure to check out our previous episodes. They include a chat with the owner of the Breakfast in America diner chain, Craig Carlson, about starting a business in France. If you like what we do, please leave us a review, and I'll catch you next time.